little over a year ago. How long was it when we had Seth out here? About a year ago. And things have changed since the day he came here, and we have the honor and privilege of simply affirming what God has already ordained. You know, when we ordain somebody, when somebody is ordained to the ministry, I was ordained to the ministry 35-something years ago. You see what God is doing in somebody's life, and we come alongside of what God is doing in that person's life, and we affirm it, and we do this thing called ordaining. And we ordained Seth Gruber to the ministry that God has called him to, that has gone international already. I believe he's the most requested speaker right now in our country. As you know, when you heard him speak, it is no exaggeration when I say, for whatever reason, for whatever God has put in his heart and God designed him to be, and when he knit him in his mother's womb, who was a director of a pregnancy resource center, he's been in the fight that long, in the womb. He says stuff nobody else says. He uses reasons and arguments nobody else comes up with. I don't know where they come from. If you have an Instagram account, I'd encourage you to get it just to get on his page and listen to what he puts out. His content continues to just expand, and the special guests that he brings on board his podcast, and just his ministry is growing. I trust you're going to share with us what's going on. It's been amazing. But this is the fight. This has always been the fight. We know it. We talk about this. It's biblical. It's the devil himself coming against the sons and daughters of God, taking them out, or calling ancient civilizations to purposefully give birth to them, only to then sacrifice them to these so-called gods, who is actually the devil himself. As Paul tells us, demons are behind idols. You got to get a grip on the truth of the battle for life and what it really is. And if you don't have it, and if you don't have the arguments, and you just feel like it was come up short when somebody is pro-choice, which is pro-death, and you don't exactly know what to say, I can't encourage you enough. You want to become familiar and then fluid with Seth's arguments. There's nothing like it. And for whatever reason, God connected us with Seth. You know, God does that for some reason with his church. There's these things he does. And I thank him for it. You thank him for it. There's a lot more I could say, but I'm not gonna, because you need to hear what this man has to say. Please welcome Seth Gruber. Love you.
Good morning. Amazing. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. Wow. I like to say, if I could bottle the spiritual, political, moral, and philosophical clarity and courage of Pastor Scott Craig and inject it like a booster shot into the arms of American pastors, I could end abortion in this country in 1 year. But if it was a booster shot, I guess it wouldn't work. So that compliment really went sideways there. It was an attempt at a compliment. Awesome to be with you guys. Well, you know what was cool last year? I wasn't here on the Sunday after Roe v. Wade got overturned, but the Sunday after the Sunday that Roe v. Wade got overturned. So 2 Sundays after Roe v. Wade got overturned. And it was just incredible. And Scott and I hit it off immediately. And, you know, we shot some guns and made lots of noise. Didn't kill any animals, but I'll have to come back another time and kill animals with, I thought you were pro-life. Why do you kill animals? Yeah, we get that kind of stuff on college campuses. You know, it's like, you know, the people who like murder children and call it healthcare suddenly have a problem killing animals. There's just an aspect of the culture of death that we're living in today that doesn't make sense absent a spiritual, theological lens and perspective. And I think people are waking up to this. What I mean by that is not landmark, but you kind of been woke and red-pilled and awake to that for a long time. But I mean, like, generally good Americans, lay people, maybe, nominally Christian, maybe not Christian, but, they think America's a Christian country. They don't like the 1619 Project. They don't think we're systemically racist. And, if you're a white person, you need to apologize because you participate in systems of oppression. And what I'm saying is that there's a lot of lay people in America who may not be believers. They may not have repented and been born again, but they just are in this position since about 2020 with the scamdemic and Anthony Fauci, the high priest of humanism, where they're just saying, I don't understand this anymore. Do you know what I'm saying? And it's actually like a really wonderful opportunity for the blood-bought bride of Christ to learn how to be salty again. Yeah. Because we've been, as my pastor Rob McCoy says, we've been waiting downstream to pick up human heartache that we helped create through our political apathy upstream, right? Because so many of the pastors in this country don't have the chest that Pastor Scott Craig has, so they'll allow the other side to define the terms of engagement. So if they label the mutilation of children in or outside the womb as healthcare, by the way, have you noticed that? Isn't that funny? They label abortion healthcare, and then the surgical genital mutilation of minors, you know what they call it? Gender-affirming healthcare. Isn't that funny? They call the mutilation of children both in and outside the womb, both sides of the womb, healthcare. Isn't that funny? So the other side will define the terms of engagement, knowing that most of the pastors in America will fold like a cheap suit if they label their demonic assault against the image of God as politics and healthcare to keep the politically impotent pastors silent. Right, so we actually missed a big opportunity in 2020 to start speaking truths that the scriptures speak to, proclaiming the full counsel of God, reminding people that life, freedom, and liberty is not man's idea, it's God's idea. And eternity is written on the heart of man. So hey, American patriot, agnostic, not yet saved, but you hate Anthony Fauci American. Hey, there's a reason why you love these things. There's a reason why you hate evil. And guess what? There's a faith and there's a creator who will help explain what right now seems so overwhelming and wicked that's going on in our country. You see, the culture war that many Christians have just been tolerating in America for so long, it was actually a proxy war for a far deeper spiritual war. You see, the enemy of our souls does not stop his demonic assault against the sons and daughters of God, against children, babies, and the family at the line of politics. Satan doesn't walk up to the line of politics and goes, oh, I guess I can't go any further because, I'm not political, But the sons and daughters of God will stop at the line of politics and say, well, I don't want to be seen as being associated with something that the high priests of humanism and the acolytes of the spirit of the age label political. So I'll only preach as much truth as the spirit of the age allows me to, lest I lose my 501c3 status and the crumbs from the table of the secular humanist elites that they toss to me to keep me quiet. This is actually what's been going on. Evil people do evil things. That's just like if you don't understand that yet, wake up, that's the norm. We need to stop blaming the doers of evil and recognize that God's called the church, his sons and daughters, to be the bulwark against freedom and liberty. And it's actually not about us, right? This whole thing, what do they say? When Christians get too political, right? When my earthly hero, Pastor Jack Hibbs, or, Rob McCoy or Scott Craig, you're getting too political, And they say, oh, you're a Christian nationalist. Have you heard that one? And I've always said, well, isn't that better than secular globalism? You see, there actually will be a dominant religion and morality that dictates the terms of engagement or that reigns in the public square. That's just a truism of history. The whole thing of the myth of moral neutrality, right? Hey, we'll just all get along together, man. You believe that killing children's healthcare. I believe that they're persons, right? Hey, you believe black people are property. I believe they're image bearers of God. You believe that children should be, raised by their parents, and actually they do a better job than the state. But hey, you believe that children should be shown gay porn in America's sex ed programs, which goes back to Planned Parenthood, by the way. And so we'll just agree to disagree, and we'll just learn to get along. Do you understand? That's a myth. That's not going to happen. Someone's standard or someone's moral perspective or immoral perspective, someone's religion will reign in the public square. So it's actually not even about us. The reason that we're growing the White Rose Resistance is probably the fastest growing pro-life organization in the country right now. And the reason why we're waking up the church and mobilizing Christians to take action is it's actually not even about us. We're not engaging to like selfishly protect our rights, you know. Oh, I just want my gun rights. And by the way, like I'm saving up for another gun right now. I couldn't be more with you. Like that, but do you understand what I'm saying? It's like it's not about like our freedom of speech and our gun rights and like all these things. No, it's actually we're just exercising our responsibility. We're doing this because we've been tasked to do it. Because when good people are silent, evil people take the ground that the good people surrendered and abdicated. And so when people in 2020 and 2021 started waking up and going, hey, drag queen story hour happened really fast. It actually didn't happen really fast. Things happen gradually, then suddenly, just like bankruptcy. Think about that. Let's say you lost your business. I'm not like singling anyone out. It's just an example, okay? Like let's say you lost your business and you go to your wife and, babe, I lost the business. We're bankrupt. I don't know how it happened. And your wife's like, babe, you've been making horrible financial decisions for decades. Like, what do you mean? How did this happen? Do you understand? Like, what if I told you the same thing is true of culture, politics, and ideologies? That things happen gradually, then the dam breaks open, right? Then suddenly, and then like lay Christians and Americans who kind of are not really engaged in the public square, not really engaged in the political culture war, but they're not woke. They just don't really want to get their hands dirty in this. They start going like, wow, this happened really fast. I don't understand. No, it's like, no, those things were brewing under the surface of the American culture war and our polity for decades. It was R.J. Rushdoony, the father of the modern homeschool movement, who probably put it best. He said, dominion does not disappear when a man renounces it. It is simply transferred to another party, perhaps to his wife, children, employer, or the state, where the individual surrenders his due dominion, where the family abdicates it, and the worker and employer reduce it. There another party, usually the state, concentrates dominion. Where organized society surrenders power, the mob gains it proportionate to the surrender. The ground that we abdicate and surrender does not become the neutral marketplace of ideas. It just gets taken by those who have set themselves up against the knowledge of God and who would throw you in a Bernie Sanders re-education gulag if they could. Like, do you understand this? Like, do you understand that like those who murder the unborn cannot be trusted to govern the born? And those who murder the unborn will one day murder you too, the longer you tolerate the sacrament of the religion of secular progressivism and secular humanism. What do I mean by this? Peter Craiff, the Catholic philosopher, said it best. He's like in his 90s now. He's an incredible mind and thinker. He said, abortion is the demonic parody of the Eucharist. That's why it uses the same holy words. This is my body. But with the opposite blasphemous meaning. Do you think it's a coincidence that the words of our Savior at the First Communion are the same stinking phrase that undergirds the entire culture of death today? Our Savior says, this is my body, now I go break it for you. Take and eat in remembrance of me, for I will not drink of this vine until I drink it anew with you in my Father's kingdom. And so what becomes the central phrase, not just of the abortion industrial complex today, but of the transgender gender delusion movement today? This is my body, my choice, and I'll kill whatever's inside of my body, or I'll chop pieces off of my body, because the serpent told me in Genesis 3, ye shall be as gods. The culture war we have been tolerating was always a proxy war for a far deeper spiritual war. All human conflict is ultimately theological. You can't get away from that fact, right? It says, scriptures say eternity is written on the heart of man. So we come from God, we've been made by God. And so man and woman can't help but live religiously. So what does this mean? It means when you rip Christianity out of a society, we go right back to demon worship, actually. So we don't become less religious. Our religion just gets far more kooky, weird, and dangerous. And so we're being told by the high priest of the religion of humanism in the Democrat Party, call them Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary who can't define what a woman is and said that Christians are the greatest and most extreme threat to freedom and democracy. We're being told by the elite humanists of the religion of progressivism that the greatest threat to America is Christianity, right, or Christian nationalism. However, they're functioning off of a religion too. Theirs is just far more ancient, far more kooky, and far more dangerous. You know who understood this? A woman whose legacy and impact on our culture of death today cannot be embellished, cannot be over-exaggerated, cannot be overstated. Her name is Margaret Sanger. She's been called the patron saint of feminism. And, well, we're about to get into that in a second, actually. You think that's funny now. By the end of today, you're going to wonder why I didn't put horns on her. But we're not there yet. Margaret Sanger understood something that every revolutionary on the left historically has always understood. And my entire sermon and message this morning is going to revolve around this statement, so I want you to listen up very carefully. If you want to be like the sons and daughters of Issachar in Scripture, they were the men who understood the times. And so they knew what Israel ought to do. That's what it says. So they understood the times they lived in. So therefore they knew what the people of God ought to do. With an understanding of the times you live in comes a responsibility to act, to engage. There's a line from Augustine's City of God. Libido dominandi. What it means is sexual liberation is political control. Libido dominandi comes from Augustine's book, The City of God. Sexual liberation as political control. What I'm telling you is that the sexual revolution had to always come before the social revolution. What do I mean by that? It means that for the cultural Marxists, those who want to build a perpetual revolution that tears down every Judeo-Christian standard, right? That replaces all of our Bible-based laws that we had in the early 20th century that protected children, family, marriage, the social fabric, children's innocence, parental rights, religion, free speech, that all of these types of liberties and blessings in America had flowed naturally out of an understanding of the gospel, an understanding of Christianity, that man and woman bear the image of God. And so we had certain natural rights that the government was set up to recognize and protect. But if you want to usher in the revolution, which was Sanger's goal, you've got to replace a Christian culture with a pagan culture. Because the people in, let's say, 1910 in America, we're not all Christians. We're not naive enough to think that every American was a repentant, born-again, regenerated believer. But most Americans were functioning off of a morality that they were borrowing from the Christian worldview. What I'm telling you is that most Americans at the turn of the previous century, in 1900, were mostly moral. Yes, there were still brothels and all these things, but it was taboo. It was over there in the dark corners. It wasn't tolerated. It wasn't celebrated. So if you're going to sell the utopian pipe dream of communism, socialism, Bernie Sanders' universal health care, if you're going to set up an elite system of government, an oligarchy, a tyrannical system, you have to somehow get the moral people to begin indulging every animalistic appetite that they have. Because if they're moral, they'll be immune to the utopian pipe dreams sold to them by revolutionaries. Because they can smell that this is all BS, that this is ridiculous. That's not a good way to run a society. And by the way, we have polling from this. Like we know generally how many Americans were Christians in the early 1900s. So libido dominandi, that which you cannot defeat militarily, corrupt through sexual enticement. And no one in the last 115 years did this better, more effectively, and more perpetually than the patron saint of feminism, Margaret Sanger. This is nothing new. Remember Balaam? Remember Balak tells Balaam to go curse Israel. And then he says, well, I can only say what the Lord tells me. And then he blesses them 3 times, remember? And Balak's like, dang it, told you to curse Israel. Balak realized he could not defeat Israel militarily. But the next time the curtains of history open in that story, do you know what happens? Israel has been corrupted through their own sexual urges and desires. Balak says, I can't defeat Israel. They're too strong. Balaam kept blessing them. God's hand is on these people. All get destroyed. So do you remember what the scriptures say? He sends women down into Peor to make Israel play the harlot. Israel corrupts themselves through sexual addiction, sexual enticement, and sexual pleasure. It's been called the Sangerization of America. But really, it's just the Balak strategy all over again. Libido, dominandi. Sexual liberation is political control. Why? Because I'm not like Alfred Kinsey. I don't believe that we're sexual beings. But sex is a powerful aspect of human nature. You're an idiot if you deny that. That's why there's a Celebrate Recovery group here. That's why every church should have a Celebrate Recovery. That's why the stats from the Barna group say about 50% of men sitting in churches today are probably looking at pornography on a weekly basis, okay? Like, you understand this? Like, if you give this to your children for Christmas, you are giving them porn for Christmas. Please do not buy this for your children. You are giving them porn for Christmas. What do I mean by this? Sex is such a powerful driver and aspect of who we are as human beings. It is a part of our nature. So if we can reduce human beings to those like most base, powerful, animalistic drivers of human behavior, right? Feed me, right? Sex, drugs, alcohol, right? This is why C.S. Lewis said in The Abolition of Man, he said the head rules the belly through the chest. What he meant was that the rational man, the head, rules over the belly, the animal, through the chest. What's the chest? Virtue, honor, and morality. The rational man, the thing that separates us from the animals, the head rules the belly. Intellect, rationality, rules raw animalistic desires through the chest, virtue, honor, and morality. Do you see how prophetic C.S. Lewis was when he wrote this in 1945? The abolition of man. So what is the abolition of man? Does anyone know? What does C.S. Lewis say in the abolition of man? Men without chests is the abolition of man. So if the rational man rules the animal, because we all have an animalistic side to us, let's just admit it. The fall has made us this way. So, but our rational nature allows us to rule over those animalistic appetites through virtue, honor, and morality. Men without chests is a very, very dangerous thing. Because it means that our rational nature rules over our appetite with nothing to temper it in between. And are human beings really good at coming up with rationalities to justify their more sinful urges? Yeah, that explains like every decision to sin since Eden. This is what Sanger saw. This is what every revolutionary on the left for centuries in the world, not just America, has seen. That if you can attack those objective truths, those virtues, those moral people, and Christianity, which provided a basis for those objective truths and a standard where we were all beholden to, then we can create animals that are easier to control. We all know addicts, right? I'm sure, like sex addicts, drug addicts, alcohol, aren't they really wonderfully involved citizens? Like, they know all the names of the city council people. They never show up late to your kids' birthdays, right? You can really rely on them. I'm not trying to be a jerk or like attacking it. What's my point? I'm trying to say, like, when you indulge every animalistic appetite you have, you can no longer govern yourself. You're not more free. You're a slave. And therefore, you're easier to control. That's where Margaret Sanger begins. The revolution that has architected and built the culture of death in 2023 that has most of us scratching our heads going, what's going on in America? Libido dominandi. Now at this point, you're like, this is a weird pro-life speaker. This guy's kind of weird. Why does he just tell us babies are image bearers of God and we shouldn't kill babies? Why? Because that's not how the culture of death works. You're right. Killing babies in abortion is child sacrifice to Moloch and Baal. It's no different. It's not progressive. It's regressive. Child sacrifice to weird pagan deities to improve your own life goes right back to the first generations immediately following Adam and Eve. Yes, it's wicked. It's evil. It's demonic. However, you can't just carve out a lane in the culture of death and say, well, babies are so awesome and we shouldn't kill them. So stop killing babies. Like, but what kind of ideologies, what kind of ideas would bring a Christian country to call the genital mutilation of children outside the womb and the dismemberment of children in the womb health care and reproductive freedom? We are like the Israelites in Hosea 4:6 when God says, my people are being destroyed for lack of knowledge. Since I was here on July 2nd, 2022, I have spoken at 35 pulpits around this country. And the number one message and response I've received from godly, pro-life, conservative Christians after service is, Seth, I have never heard any of that before. Men and women in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Seth, I've never heard any of that before. How can we defeat an enemy that we don't understand? How can we destroy an enemy that we don't know exists? However, there are spiritual principalities behind these individuals and movements. Satan is using individuals to further his alternative Great Commission. Let me be very clear. The revolution of humanism, secular progressivism, neo-Malthusianism, Darwinism, Klaus Schwabism, Hillary Clintonism, Bill Gatesism, whatever you want to call it, it was always an alternative revolution to Christianity, the first revolution. It was to tear down and replace every Christian standard of beauty, morality, and truth, and to take their revolution to the uttermost, to the very ends of the earth. So you don't just like chop off the tentacle of abortion on the Leviathan and say, hey, Pastor Scott Craig, we killed the Leviathan. Meanwhile, 9 other tentacles are coming for your family and children. However, I believe God's called me to the fight to save unborn children. I believe he's called me to wake up the church to end abortion. However, you can't just hack at one tentacle of the Leviathan and expect to kill it. Do you understand how humanism works? This alternative religion. It was Francis Schaeffer who said, humanism is placing man at the center of all things and making him the measure of all things. For if man becomes God, and the serpent was right, that God's holding out on you, for God doth know, Eve, that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened. So Eve got woke, and ye shall be as gods. If man becomes God, then there is no end to the evil that he can do and perpetrate on this country. So we have a shirt in the back when you come and give me a hug and sign up as a monthly donor for the White Rose Resistance. That's a beast, and it has tentacles. And I'm explaining to the church how the culture of death works, and it comes with a little booklet with a write-up on each tentacle. This is how the culture of death works. Have you noticed the coincidental nature of how the liberal establishment always celebrates the same core pagan sacraments? Like, why are they always on the same page with everything? mRNA gene therapy, porn in the classrooms, transgenderism, abortion, universal health care, which is just socialism. Like, why are they always on the same page with everything? But evangelical Christians in America bicker and argue over whether Christianity really speaks to all of these issues. And we have Christians so divided on whether the evil we see unfolding in our country is truly evil, or if we should tolerate critical theory, because it gives us a lens through which to understand systems of oppression. And so maybe we should start preaching critical race theory, which is from the Frankfurt School in Germany, which came to Columbia University in New York City, which is all of the reason we have cultural Marxism today, because really there's a Christian spin on these pagan sacraments that will help us understand why black people are so discriminated against and why white people need to apologize. And we bicker and moan, and we're not on the same page on what the full counsel of God means and how it speaks to all of these issues. But the other side is, they're always aligned on all of their core pagan sacraments. You think that's an accident? Is that just a coincidence? Or are they functioning off of a religion, a worldview that informs their pagan support for a lot of the evil that we see? What am I trying to tell you? If you want to end the murder of children in America, the dismemberment and abortion of babies in this country, you have to understand how we got here. The high priests of humanism that have ushered in this culture of death. We have to remember our heritage, where we've come from, and where did we go wrong? What mistakes did we make that have led to the insanity of 2023? Well, I'm no historian. I'm no Bill Federer. God bless that guy. By the way, he's going to be in our documentary, and we might show you the trailer for that film today. But I'm no Bill Federer, okay? However, I think that no one is more deserving of the title of architect of the culture of death than Margaret Sanger. Because Planned Parenthood is not just an abortion organization. They are behind both the architecting and the funding of almost every new iteration of the Darwinist, neo-Malthusian, humanist culture of death we're living in. Planned Parenthood has their tentacles and fingers, like literally into more than you could possibly imagine. And today, and this has been true since the 70s, Planned Parenthood is the largest, best funded, and most profitable 501c3 in human history. Did you know that? Planned Parenthood, since the 70s, was the largest and is the best funded, most profitable nonprofit organization in human history. They're behind all the kooky pornographic sex ed in the schools that's bringing all the moms and dads to school board meetings over the last 2 years. They're behind all the transgender movement. And in fact, today, as of 2023, Planned Parenthood is the largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers in America. As of 2023, Planned Parenthood makes more money off of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers than off of baby killing. Yeah, you didn't know that, huh? But Seth, why are you not staying in your lane? Because they're just an abortion organization. No, they're not. And they never were, and they never have been. Yes, child sacrifice is the conclusion of the sexual revolution. That's true. But that has never been their only lane. So how did this happen? In the early 1900s, Margaret Sanger, living in Greenwich Village, New York, which is where Friends is filmed. It's where that dude got naked a few months ago and was jiggling around the fountain, the famous Greenwich Village, New York City fountain, like right next to the Washington Memorial there. Not the Washington Monument, not DC, Greenwich Village, New York. Like, this has always been kind of a boiling pot for some of the kookiest, most radical revolutionaries on the left for the last 110 years. Greenwich Village, New York. Sanger begins parroting the sexual revolution. She was one of the first open apologists for the joys of the flesh. If it feels good, do it. That goes all the way back to the early 1900s with Margaret Sanger. Back when saying that was super taboo. Like back when saying that was like super sketch. Like people didn't support that, you understand? Because we were functioning off of a Judeo-Christian morality. She starts meeting with socialists, anarchists, communists, Bill Haywood, the New York labor movement, the Socialist Party in New York City. And she goes to her friend Mabel Dodge's apartment in these sort of bohemian salons and gatherings filled with fine food and wine and lectures on the revolution, lectures on cultural Marxism, lectures on the birth control movement. Some of those early gatherings included people like Roger Baldwin, the co-founder of the ACLU. So if you're wondering why that organization is garbage today, It's because it goes all the way back. Sanger writes her first newspaper in 1914, her first magazine called Woman Rebel. Woman Rebel. With the tagline, no gods and no masters. 1914! By the way, Planned Parenthood is launched in 1921 under the name the American Birth Control League. 1914, though, is the first pen-to-paper writing we have of the patron saint of feminism. The tagline of her newspaper, Woman Rebel, said, no gods and no masters. Did you know ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims? Yeah, I know you have to chew on that one a little bit. I know it's still Sunday morning. Ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. I was in D.C. this January for the March for Life, and I don't march. I walk ahead of the March for Life to find the Moloch worshipers manifesting their transgender child sacrifice legions. The reproductive health advocates defending a woman's right to choose. Sorry, Freudian slip. It's when you say one thing but mean your mother. I apologize. And so I found them. I found the Moloch worshipers with their cart, with all of their like pagan sacramental phrases, and the trans and the rainbow flag and I found them with their bullhorn, and they're screaming at me. Guess what huge sign they had on this cart they were pushing around to mock pro-lifers ahead of the March for Life? Guess what it said? No gods and no masters. In January of this year, 2023. That's the title of Margaret Sanger's first magazine in 1914. And the acolytes of the patron saint of feminism are quoting their goddess 110 years later. No gods, no masters. You think they came up with that phrase themselves? Here's what Sanger said. Rebel women claim the following rights: the right to be lazy, the right to be an unmarried mother, the right to destroy, and the right to live. From her first magazine. You know, the Bible talks about how bad seed yields a bitter harvest. So if you understand the seed, you can predict the harvest. And if the harvest is rotten, then you know the seeds were too. This is a biblical concept. These are the seeds of where Planned Parenthood begins. She starts to send her magazines into people's mailboxes. She starts to send her writings to people in New York City, defending sexual chaos, sexual enticement. She defended the need for political assassinations. This gets her indicted on 3 counts for breaking the Comstock laws in New York City, the anti-obscenity laws. Like you couldn't send obscenity to people. We still have obscenity laws on the books today, by the way. We just never enforce them. It's ridiculous. So this gets her indicted, and she's facing arrest. So guess what the founder of Planned Parenthood does? She ships her kids off to be raised by someone else. She has her socialist friends in the New York labor movement forge her a passport, and she flees to England. This is where Sanger begins. I know it'll shock you to find out that the founder of Planned Parenthood wasn't a great mother. I know that's like a man bites dog story. It's like, couldn't have predicted that one. She spends 18 months in England, and believe it or not, is more radicalized there than she was in Greenwich Village, New York, with the socialists there. And she meets the neo-Malthusians. Now, anyone ever heard of Thomas Malthus? Right, so ever heard of, have you ever met a liberal who said there's too many people on planet Earth? And that if we don't significantly reduce the population, our grandchildren are all going to die because they won't have a Earth. Okay, you know where that idea comes from? Thomas Malthus. That's where we get the term Malthusianism. And he said that food production cannot keep up with population growth. I'll read this to you in a second. So if food production can't keep up with population growth, what's the inevitable result? Massive starvation and everyone will die. So he argued against Christian charities who were loving, feeding, and providing for the very people who we should allow to just die off for the welfare of humanity, which is always the alibi of tyrants, by the way. Right. Thomas Malthus is the first Anthony Fauci. He was just following the science. And he argued that his beliefs were actually scientific. I'm not just taking a pot shot against him. He argued that this was scientific, okay? That's where the overpopulationist movement and ideas begin. So when I tell you Sanger meets the neo-Malthusians in England, it's the modern-day disciples of Malthus. Too many people on planet Earth. We got to do something about that. So Malthusianism naturally leads into eugenics. You got to determine who's sterilized and who isn't, who's allowed to have kids and who isn't, because there's too many people on planet Earth. So I'm just forcibly sterilizing the epileptics and the physically and mentally disabled and handicapped and black people. I'm only doing that because I love Mother Gaia so much. And there won't be an earth for our grandchildren to inherit if we don't do something about these people, right? Sanger called them human weeds and defective stocks. Human weeds and defective stocks. Here's Thomas Malthus in his magnum opus, an essay on the principle of population. Now, some of you are like, this is too much. Why don't you just preach expositionally, Seth? It's because we don't understand how we got here. And so if you want to make sure you're not destroyed for lack of knowledge, and you want to be the sons of Issachar who understand the times, then we have to go super intellectual history, like I got to tell you all this stuff, or you will be destroyed. Okay, so here's Thomas Malthus. All children born beyond what would be required to keep up the population to a desired level must necessarily perish, unless room be made for them by the death of grown persons. Have you noticed that the people who say there's too many people on planet Earth will never prove the courage of their own convictions by slitting their throat? So when he says, unless room be made for them by the deaths of grown persons, newsflash, he didn't volunteer to prove those convictions by Hillary Clintoning himself. Suiciding himself, sorry. Another Freudian slip. Got a lot of those today, Pastor Scott. Sorry. Therefore, we should facilitate, instead of foolishly and vainly endeavoring to impede the operations of nature in producing this mortality. And if we dread the too frequent visitation of the horrid form of famine, we should sedulously encourage the other forms of destruction which we compel nature to use. Instead of recommending cleanliness to the poor, we should encourage contrary habits. In our towns, we should make the streets more narrow, crowd more people into the houses to court the return of the plague. And in the country, we should build our villages near stagnant pools and particularly encourage settlements in all marshy and unwholesome situations. But above all, we should reprobate specific remedies for ravaging diseases and restrain those benevolent but much mistaken men who thought they were doing a service to mankind by projecting schemes for the total extirpation of particular disorders. Can I translate that for you? Some people are good and some people are bad. We need more of the good people and less of the bad people. The bad people tend to be the poorer and darker of skin and the more sickly, and the good people tend to be the richer and more paler of skin. And so Christian charities suck, you stupid Christians with your ministries of mercy. Why are you keeping those alive who must necessarily perish to ensure that our grandchildren have an earth to inherit? That comes from Thomas Malthus's book. I just read that to you verbatim. So when Sanger meets the neo-Malthusians, now you understand why Planned Parenthood has always been in bed with the overpopulation movement. They're not in bed with the overpopulation movement. They are the overpopulation movement. They are the population reduction movement. By the way, Alan Guttmacher, who took over as president of Planned Parenthood when Margaret Sanger died, openly admitted this. He said we're running a demonstration program in regards to population reduction. And he said the problem's so vast that governments will have to take over. That's a quote from Alan Guttmacher, who took over as the president of Planned Parenthood when Margaret Sanger died in the 60s. He said, regarding the population reduction movement, he said, we're running a demonstration program here at Planned Parenthood, but the problem's so vast that governments will have to take over. So don't take my word for it. Just quote those demons right back to your liberal friends. So the neo-Malthusians believe that if Western civilization were to survive, the physically unfit, the materially poor, the spiritually diseased, the racially inferior, and the mentally incompetent had to somehow be suppressed and isolated, or perhaps even eliminated. So Malthusianism inevitably leads to eugenics. The theory that not all races are the same and that the bad races must die out to make room for the good ones. So yes, if you're thinking of Hitler, Mao Zedong, and Mussolini, good job, that's all eugenics. Sanger then met a man named Havelock Ellis. By the way, anyone heard this pro-life history before at Planned Parenthood? Y'all ever heard this history of Planned Parenthood before? Did you watch me at Jack Hibbs? Yeah, okay. So, oh good, we got a son of Issachar over here. Look, he knew this stuff all by himself. And that's the rarity in most churches today. We do not understand how we got here. So have you ever heard of Alfred Kinsey? So Havelock Ellis was England's Alfred Kinsey. England's Alfred Kinsey. He wrote over 100 books on every weird form of sexual experimentation. Havelock Ellis was himself impotent, so he was always trying to find new ways to get excited. That's the PG-13 version. He hosted orgies in his home. Havelock Ellis. You probably never heard that name, but his impact on the sexual revolution is quite significant. He forced his wife into lesbianism and would sit in an armchair and watch. And then guess who began a raging affair with Margaret Sanger during her 18 months in England? Havelock Ellis. He becomes Sanger's #1 political and sexual influence, and they would be pen pals until his death in England. And by the way, the other day I bought 8 copies of the Birth Control Review, which was Sanger's magazine that she launched in 1917. in 1917, and these were in 1922. So I bought these 101-year-old original birth control review, which was Planned Parenthood's magazine. And it has these just like gushing, drooling, like endorsement pieces of Havelock Ellis. One of them says, Havelock Ellis, a great humanist. Like we have forgotten our heritage. We've forgotten our history. And there has been, by the way, an intentional campaign to sort of curate and edit the more rough edges of the history of eugenics and Planned Parenthood and Sanger's involvement with all of that. So it's not completely your fault for not knowing it. You really have to do your research and read and find primary sources and dig deep. Some of the books where you can learn this stuff, they're not even available online anymore. And when you find them, they're like $115, $200 to get these used copies of books that had exposed all this stuff way back then. But the liberal establishment doesn't want to republish these things today. Like, you really have to be a son of Issachar to understand this stuff. This is why I study this stuff, so you don't have to, and so we can rebuild Christian resistance in America. So Havelock Ellis had a mentor named Francis Galton. Francis Galton coined the term eugenics. It's where the term comes from. He invented the word eugenics. Francis Galton is the modern father of the eugenics movement, whose life was forever changed when he read his cousin's book, Origin of Species. Oh! It's all making sense. So look at all these light bulbs. Ding! Oh, right. Yeah, Darwinism, survival of the fittest, so might makes right in the religion of humanism. Because either you came from a monkey or from electrified sludge that happened to arrange itself randomly into what we call consciousness. And so therefore, it is an animal kingdom. But what happens in the animal kingdom? The strong survive and the weak die, even if the strong have to kill the weak in order to survive. Darwinism, whose cousin, Francis Galton, reads Origin of Species, it changes his life. He coins the term eugenics, and he becomes the modern father of the eugenics movement. Who then mentors his protege, Havelock Ellis, who becomes the #1 political and sexual influence on the life of Margaret Sanger, the patron saint of feminism. Wow, Seth, we went really fast from the premise, man is an animal, to eugenics in the same family, to sexual chaos, orgy hosting in your room, like weird, like sexual chaos, to child sacrifice, the patron saint of feminism, and the largest, best funded nonprofit in human history, and the largest abortion provider in the world. That happened fast. From Darwinism to eugenics to the unfit to sexual chaos to child sacrifice. The more things change, the more they stay the same. She returns to America and in 1916 opens up the first illegal, unlicensed birth control clinic in the Brownsville section of New York. First thing she does when she gets back from England. By the way, she returned because her husband had been indicted for breaking the Comstock laws, for sending obscenity in the mail. So she comes back to support her degenerate husband, and William Sanger, and opens up the first Planned Parenthood clinic in 1916. This is the first clinic. It's the first attempt to put flesh on her ideas. This was no longer just rhetorical, linguistic assent to ideologies. This was now neo-Malthusian praxis. This was praxis, you understand? This was Marxism praxis, Darwinism praxis. That's the practical application of ideas. It's no longer armchair theologians. It's now applying our premises to rebuild the civilization that Christianity has done so much damage to. Why didn't she open it in Greenwich Village, where she was from? Well, that's where all the rich white people lived. Brownsville was a poor immigrant community comprised of blacks, Slavs, Italians, and Jews in 1916. Later, we're going to show you the trailer for my first movie, called the 1916 Project. It's not the 1619 Project, right? When they said that all of our systemically bigoted racist culture today is allegedly explained by 1619 when the first black slaves came to American shores. In 2019, the New York Times publishes that. It gets rolled out into podcasts and K through 12 curriculum that starts getting utilized in history classes in America's public schools. So then St. George Floyd happens, right, who had enough fentanyl in him to kill a horse and robbed pregnant women at gunpoint. Right, but St. George Floyd, right, saint of the religion of humanism, BLM Incorporated, the disciples of the 1619 Project, because the New York Times 1619 Project gave intellectual gravitas to political activists. It provided the academic justification of ideologies they had already imbibed. Does that make sense? So what happened post George Floyd, July 2020? The left started eating their own. Do you remember this? It was a radical left in BLM and Antifa that started going after corporations. They started going after organizations, companies that in any way had racism wrapped up in their founding. And they didn't stop with Planned Parenthood. This is a story that the church missed out on. We didn't realize how significant this moment was in July of 2020. Radical pro-abortion leftists started attacking Planned Parenthood because of the 1619 Project, because of this belief that if something began in racism, including America allegedly, that you couldn't redeem that country or institution, right? Because hence the phrase systemic. Do you understand? The racism is systemic, which means that you can't legislate your way out of it. It's so systemic, root and branch, that the only justifiably moral thing to do is to burn it all down and rebuild it from the ashes. And they did do a lot of burning down of police stations and courthouses in 2020. That wasn't coincidental. That was cultural Marxism, 1619 critical theory praxis. Then they went after Planned Parenthood. Not conservatives, the left. And they said, Planned Parenthood, your founder was a piece of human vermin. She was a racist. So the Planned Parenthood director of Greater New York comes out in July of 2020 and says, we're done making excuses for our founder and the damage she did to communities of color. And then the flagship Manhattan, New York City Planned Parenthood Center, which was called the Sanger Health Center, gets renamed. They take her name off the buildings. They publicly announce this. Planned Parenthood canceled Sanger in 2020, not because of Tucker Carlson, Ben Shapiro, Glenn Beck, and Charlie Kirk, but because of the pro-abortion BLM 1619 crowd. And then New York City took the sign off of the corner that Planned Parenthood sat on that said Margaret Sanger Square. So New York City canceled Sanger, and Planned Parenthood canceled Sanger. This should cause anyone with 2 brain cells left to rub together to ask one simple question. What were you hiding from us? Because you told me, liberal establishment and activist media, I call them journalistic prostitutes for the culture of death, you told me that Sanger was a feminist slay queen, that she was the patron saint of feminism, that when Hillary Clinton got the Margaret Sanger Award, she said, I'm so honored to be recognized along such an amazing woman who is taking on stereotypes and crashing through glass ceilings and blah, 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 blah. You said she was a wonderful woman who palled around with a couple weird people, but like she wasn't a racist. Now you canceled her and you took the name off the building? So what were you hiding from us? What's the real story, the real history of the Sangerization of America and the patron saint of feminism? It's not the 1619 Project. It's the 1916 Project. If you want to understand the culture of death in America over the last 3 years, you don't go back to 1619. You go back to 1916, when Sanger opened up the first illegal, unlicensed Planned Parenthood clinic. It gets shut down in 2 weeks by the authorities. Sanger spends 30 days in the workhouse for breaking obscenity laws again. And the second she's released, she starts her magazine, The Birth Control Review, which would guide her ideological formation for the next 2 or 3 decades. She launched the American Birth Control League in 1921, which changed their name in 1942 to Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood was not part of the eugenics movement. They were the eugenics movement. Let Sanger speak for herself. Eugenics without birth control seems to us a house built upon the sands. It is at the mercy of the rising streams of the unfit. Do you see she just used a biblical metaphor? The house built upon the sands or the house built upon the rock. She's saying, I'm trying to build this house called eugenics. But she says eugenics without birth control is a house built upon the sands. It is at the mercy of the rising streams of the unfit. You'll notice the term fit and unfit are always used by eugenicists. When she launched her organization, the Birth Control League, in 1921, they shared office spaces with the American Eugenics Society. Yeah, the American Eugenics Society. They shared office spaces. And all of the funding for the American Birth Control League, later renamed Planned Parenthood, all the funding and all the first board members were part of the eugenics movement in America. Eugenics was not this like Hitlerian thing like over there in Germany. It was also had massive sway over our culture, institutions, and politics in America. Her great aspiration was this, as she put it in her book, The Pivot of Civilization. She wanted to, quote, create a race of thoroughbreds by encouraging more children from the fit and less from the unfit. As she put it in a speech at the 1921 International Eugenics Congress in New York, quote, the most urgent problem today is how to limit and discourage the overfertility of the mentally and physically defective. Then she started hosting conferences in New York in 1925. Guess what she called them? The Neo-Malthusian Birth Control Conferences. So like if you think like, Seth's he's just sensationalism. He's just like embellishing and overstating his points to rile up the church into a frenzy so they give him monthly donations for his ministry. Like, let me speak very clearly. That's what they called their ideas. Like the conference she held at Hotel McAlpin in New York City in 1925 was called, we have the paperwork from this, Neo-Malthusian Birth Control Conference. That's what she called it. So what is she saying? Neo-Malthusianism, which was what, too many people on planet Earth? So we have to reduce the population? Neo-Malthusian Birth Control Conference. Oh, so the two things go hand in hand. Birth control was not this thing Planned Parenthood came up with to help poor women plan their parenthood. It was a tool of eugenics. So here's a Sanger quote for you. Birth control is not contraception. We don't have the slide for this, I'm sorry. Birth control is not contraception thoughtlessly and indiscriminately practiced. It means the cultivation and release of the better racial elements in our society and the gradual suppression, elimination, and eventual extinction of defective stocks, those human weeds which threaten the blossoming of the finest flowers of American civilization. So what did she just say? Birth control, what was the first line? Birth control is not contraception thoughtlessly and indiscriminately practiced. It means the cultivation and release of the better racial elements in our society. So, I'm quoting to you the words of the patron saint of feminism to tell you that for her, birth control and neo-Malthusian aims or eugenics aims were not these disparate groups. They literally went hand in hand. So she started hosting these conferences. The quotes are pretty disgusting. We don't have time for them. Then guess what she did? She went against organized charity and Christian 501c3 ministries, just like Thomas Malthus. Because those people need to die out. Why are you caring for the unfit? For the welfare of humanity, those people need to just die off. So Sanger argued against Christian charities, just like Stalin, just like Hitler, and just like Thomas Malthus. All right, ready for the racism? Oh boy. In 1939, the American Birth Control League launches the Negro Project. Not what I called it, what they called it. They called it the Negro Project. Here was the proposal, the opening proposal. And isn't it great that I've done all the research to find these primary source documents and where they actually wrote this for you? Because we have it all, okay? The mass of Negroes, particularly in the South, are still breeding carelessly and disastrously, with the result that the increase among Negroes, even more than among whites, is from that portion of the population least intelligent and fit. Okay, so it's not how I would ever speak about black people, but that's a Margaret Sanger quote from the American Birth Control League's Negro Project. Her goal was to get colored ministers on board to travel to black enclaves to propagandize birth control. As she wrote it in a letter to Dr. Clarence Gamble, a letter we have the photocopy of, we proposed to hire three or four colored ministers, preferably with social service backgrounds and with engaging personalities. Because the most successful educational approach to the Negro is through a religious appeal. We do not want word to get out.
that we want to exterminate the Negro population. And the black minister is the one who can straighten out that idea if it ever occurs to any more of his rebellious members. T.D. Jakes, Raphael Warnock, Jackie Hill Perry, Lecrae, all pastors or Christian artists and leaders who use their platform to forward the job description Margaret Sanger had applied to Black America. All of those individuals either vote for or defend and celebrate the very elected Democrats who have made it their party platform to protect abortion through point of birth and make you fund it with their tax dollars. This is black genocide. 3.5% of the American public are black women of childbearing age in their fertility years. That's 3.5%. However, abortions in the black community in America, according to CDC and US Census Bureau statistics, account for 37 to 39% of the annual abortion rate in America. If you're a capitalist who doesn't care how much heartache you cause as long as you make a quick buck, that's a great deal. Is not 40% of your business's income from 3.5% of your client base a great deal? If something doesn't change soon with the abortion rate in the black community, in 50 years you're going to have to go to the Smithsonian to see a black person. The Negro Project, launched in 1939. But just like Turning Point USA and Students for Life, you've got to build a team. You've got to have regional coordinators. You've got to send your grassroots activists out into the community, right? To forward your organization's goals and aims. So guess what? Margaret Sanger started hiring Negro Project directors. Negro Project directors to propagandize birth control in black enclaves, allegedly to help black America, right? Because they're such bad mothers that if they have more children, they won't be able to be good mothers by having more kids. So of course it is racism inherent to assume that a certain people group are just not as inwardly strong or as qualified to be a mother to multiple children, because then you're just gonna suck as a parent if you have too many kids. So allegedly it was a way to help black America from, well, what Sanger said was from swarming and spawning. That was swarming and spawning. And the way our Creator calls that was to be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it, exercise dominion. Well, we have some quotes from her Negro Project directors. You want one? Yes. Don't yell at me. It's not my quote. There is a great danger that we will fail because the Negroes think that this is a plan for their extermination. Hence, let's appear to let the colored run it. Whoa, what? I'm not making this stuff up. I know it's like so shocking that it's hard to absorb, especially when you've never heard someone like me speak on abortion before. I found this stuff. They were saying this in 1939, 1940, that black people kind of recognized what the real goal was. So let's let them think they run it. Which is why 79% of Planned Parenthood surgical abortion facilities today are located within walking distance of majority black neighborhoods, and they will only hire black young women as the receptionists at the front desk to greet the black mothers whose black unborn babies have dollar signs attached to every limb, so that when they see someone who looks like them, they'll assume everything's okay. Here was another Negro Project director. I wonder if Southern darkies can ever be entrusted with a clinic. Our experience causes us to doubt their ability to work, except under white supervision. That's another quote from a Negro Project director. Wait, black people only working under white supervision? I've heard that one before. Oh, plantations. So the Democrat Party once said that blacks were the property of plantation owners whose land they lived on. And now the same party says that babies are the property of their mothers whose bodies they live in. But where one is has no bearing on who one is. The Negro Project, interesting. What about Hitler? What about the eugenics movement internationally? Was Planned Parenthood separated from that? had nothing to do with Hitler and Heinrich Himmler and Fritz Sauckel and Robert Ley. It was completely detached, right? These movements weren't happening at the same time, based off of the same books and authors and ideas, right? Margaret Sanger's first founding board member of Planned Parenthood launched in 1921. You guys aren't going to believe this. You're going to someone's going to get up and be like that. Pastor, he's lying. This is not true. CNN told me that she was just awesome. Chris Cuomo, I don't know. This is the real history, the hidden history of the sexual revolution. His name was Lothrop Stoddard. It's funny, if you Google the name Lothrop Stoddard, you'll read some shocking things in the first 5 pages of Google. However, one thing you will not find is that he was Margaret Sanger's founding board member the year that Planned Parenthood was established. Remember I told you there has been a concentrated campaign to file down the more rough edges of the history of humanism, neo-Malthusianism, Darwinism. Do you know why? Because it's today's liberal establishment's history. They walk in the same intellectual tradition as these people. So there's a reason why it's hard to find this stuff. Lothrop Stoddard was a high official of the Massachusetts Ku Klux Klan. He was one of the intellectual fathers of the KKK in America. Lothrop Stoddard wrote a book called, let's see here, The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. That's right. The Rising Tide of Color Against White World Supremacy. That was Lothrop Stoddard's book. Yeah. He wrote another book called The Revolt Against Civilization, The Menace of the Underman. The menace. Ooh. The menace of the underman. Who's the underman and why are they a menace? Black, Slavs, Italians, and Jews, and those with physical and mental deformities. That's the underman, right? The menace. Ooh, we're here. You understand? Adolf Hitler's chief racial theorist, Alfred Rosenberg. Hitler's chief racial theorist, Alfred Rosenberg, appropriated the German term Untermensch. Untermensch. The title of Heinrich Himmler's famous Nazi propaganda book. Translated subhuman. Untermensch. Subhuman. He got the term Untermensch from the English version of Lothrop Stoddard's book, The Menace of the Underman. Underman, Untermensch. Yes, you just heard me correctly. The Nazis got the term subhuman from Margaret Sanger's first board member, Lothrop Stoddard. Oh, and then in 1939, Lothrop Stoddard traveled to the Third Reich on a journalistic interview tour. And he was shown incredible preferential treatment by the Nazis. Why? Because he was on the same team. He wrote about it in his book, Into the Darkness, Nazi Germany Today, published in 1940. Trip out on this. Lothrop Stoddard is the only American we know of who was given free rein to not just travel within the Third Reich, but to interview and meet with high-ranking Nazi officials, including a brief meeting with Adolf Hitler himself. Then Hitler gave Lothrop Stoddard a photo that was taken of the two of them meeting and asked him not to publish the photo or the results or content of their conversation. But Lothrop Stoddard, the first board member of Planned Parenthood when it was established in 1921, is the only American we know of who sat down with Hitler in the Nazi headquarters and chit-chatted with him. Later in 1934, Hans Gunther, a Nazi himself who was a German race anthropologist, a German anthropologist referred to Lothrop Stoddard as one of the spiritual fathers of Nazi Germany. Oh, wow! Didn't learn about that in my American history course in public school. Do you remember when I told you the American Birth Control League shared office spaces with the American Eugenics Society when it was established in 1921? Okay. At the time, the American Eugenics Society was being led by Madison Grant. Now, Madison Grant originally got famous for putting a black man in a cage with a monkey at the New York City Bronx Zoo to, quote, illustrate evolution. Maybe you've heard of Ota Benga. Your homework today is after church. Go Google Ota, O-T-A, Benga, B-E-N-G-A. Ota Benga, you will find a picture of an African pygmy with a monkey around his neck behind the bars of a zoo cage. You know who funded that little thing? Madison Grant, leader of the American Eugenics Society, whose book on eugenics came out the same year Sanger opened up the first illegal, unlicensed birth control clinic in the Brownsville section of New York, 1916. It was called The Passing of the Great Race. Here's what Madison Grant said. Mistaken regard for what are believed to be divine laws, there's that hatred of Christianity, and a sentimental belief in the sanctity of human life, those ideas tend to prevent the elimination of defective infants and the sterilization of such adults who are themselves of no value to the community. The laws of nature, Darwinism, require the obliteration of the unfit. And human life is only valuable when it is of use to the community or race. In 1936, the Third Reich labeled The Passing of the Great Race essential reading. Madison Grant fundraised with Margaret Sanger, wrote for each other, and spoke at each other's conferences. That guy right there, who shared office spaces with Planned Parenthood when it was established in 1921. That guy right there. His executive secretary was named Leon Whitney. Leon Whitney wrote in Sanger's magazine, The Birth Control Review, a piece called Selective Sterilization, which adamantly praised the Third Reich's pre-Holocaust race purification programs. Then one day, Leon Whitney, this guy's executive secretary at the American Eugenics Society, Leon Whitney got a letter in the mail one day from a German corporal, recently out of prison and rising in the German political scene, thanking Leon Whitney for his work and writings on eugenics. So Leon Whitney ran over to a committee meeting he interrupted to tell his boss, Madison Grant, our writings are influencing the Germans. Madison Grant smiled and chuckled and pulled out his own letter he had just received from the same German corporal, recently out of prison after his failed coup attempt in Munich, calling the passing of the great race, quote, his Bible. The man who wrote those letters was named Adolf Hitler. So when you hear Glenn Beck, Charlie Kirk, Michael Knowles, Ben Shapiro, and Tucker Carlson say, hey, the abortion thing, it's kind of like a Nazi-esque kind of thing. That's not a Republican talking point to rile up the base. I'm giving you the history behind why people say things like that. Madison Grant. What a piece of poop. Sanger had an advisor to Planned Parenthood named Ernst Rudin. This is the last dude we'll do. Ernst Rudin wrote in Sanger's review as well a piece called Eugenic Sterilization and Urgent Need in 1933. Remember, this is Planned Parenthood's magazine, The Birth Control Review, which she launched immediately after she was released from prison for her 1916 Brownsville birth control clinic, okay? Ernst Rudin, at the time he wrote this piece in Sanger's magazine, was serving as none other than Hitler's director of genetic sterilization. As Hitler's director of genetic sterilization. And Sanger's personal advisor at Planned Parenthood in 1933, writing in her magazine, hey, did you just get to write in Sanger's magazine whatever you wanted? Or did you have to be invited? And who invited you to write? The editor, Margaret Sanger. Hitler once told his comrades about how he was studying American laws on eugenics, and so that actually provided a lot of the inspiration for the eugenics policies in the Third Reich. What am I trying to tell you? 100 years ago, following the science meant being a eugenicist. From Harvard to Princeton, to Nobel Prize-winning scientists, to the American Museum of Natural History, to Supreme Court justices, eugenics in the early 1900s was just seen as the inevitable arc of the moral universe bending towards justice. So much so that Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, in the very infamous case Buck versus Bell, you guys remember that Carrie Bell, Virginia's mandated sterilization law in 1924, mandated sterilization of those deemed unfit to reproduce. 3 years later, goes to the Supreme Court of this country. You understand, like all this stuff happened. Like it wasn't that long ago. 1927, our Supreme Court in Buck versus Bell, 8-1 decision, 8-1, upholds Virginia's mandated sterilization of those deemed unfit to reproduce. Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, who presided over the decision and was a eugenicist and political progressive, summed up the science in Buck versus Bell when he said, quote, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough. Guess who endorsed and praised Buck versus Bell when it was decided in 1927? Margaret Sanger publicly endorsed and praised the decision in the 8-1 decision, Buck versus Bell, which allowed Virginia to mandate the sterilization of those considered a threat to the gene pool. Yes, it's bad to kill babies. Yes, we shouldn't kill babies. But do you understand how that happened? It's not detached from the larger humanist sexual revolution. It just happens to be one of the core sacraments of the religion of liberalism and humanism and progressivism. But there are tentacles that run deep in this country that have intentionally made it their revolution to replace every remnant of Christian Western civilization and replace it with the perpetual sexual revolution. Libido dominandi, sexual liberation is political control. Within 10 years of Buck versus Bell, you had laws mandating the sterilization of those considered a threat to the gene pool, passed in 32 different states. Yeah, did you think eugenics was a Hitlerian Germany thing? No. There was a huge eugenics movement in America. And there still is today. With abortion, for every unborn child, my wife's calling me, is labeled unfit to live. And isn't it interesting that the same organization that murders children in the womb is the largest provider of cross-sex hormones and puberty blockers in America? Which, if you follow the lies of gender ideology, what's the intellectual conclusion? The praxis, the application of those ideas. Sterilization! Oh, what a coinkydink! Let's just be coincidental and accidental. By the way, the drugs they often use to sterilize minors, because Sally thinks he's Tommy, is a drug called Lupron, which they use to sterilize pedophiles and rapists in prison. Yeah, you bet your butt we still have a eugenics movement in America today, and it's more normalized, celebrated, and funded than Oliver Wendell Holmes could have hoped to in his dizziest daydreams in 1927 with Buck versus Bell. I guess ideas have consequences, church. Guess who was leading the American Eugenics Society at the time of Buck versus Bell? A man named Henry Osborn, a paleontologist and eugenicist. So he loved dead animals but hated human beings. Isn't that funny how every Democrat and liberal today loves the rights of animals more than human beings? Which is why if you disturb the egg of a bald eagle today, you will be fined up to $250,000 and sentenced up to 4 years in federal prison. But murder a child at any point in their prenatal development and you will be celebrated as a great defender of women's rights. Fulfilling G.K. Chesterton's prophetic warning when he said, wherever there is animal worship, there will be human sacrifice. Henry Osborn, okay, loves the dead dinosaurs, hates human beings. Leader of the American Eugenics Society, 1927, Buck versus Bell. Here's what Henry Osborn said. As science has enlightened the government in the prevention and spread of disease, it must also enlighten government in the prevention of the spread and multiplication of worthless members of society. Do you know who the only man was in the late 19-teens and early 1920s who saw everything I just went through with you for the last 45 minutes? He saw it all. He was trying to blow the trumpet like Ezekiel to warn the people. His name is G.K. Chesterton. A Catholic. For some reason, the Catholics seem to have always had more clarity and been louder and bolder to rebuild a culture of life than most Protestants. Obviously, Francis Schaeffer is an exception, but you know what I mean. And he wrote a book called Eugenics and Other Evils. He was the loudest voice in Western civilization against the growing eugenics movement of the early 1900s. And here's the real kicker. You want to talk about being destroyed for lack of knowledge? You want to talk about being a son of Issachar who understands the times? He wrote in 1920 in an English newspaper, 10 months before Planned Parenthood is established. Remember 1921 it's established? 1920, Chesterton writes in an English newspaper. Here's what he said. We are not so very far off from even the sacrifice of babies. If not to a crocodile, at least to a creed. The creed of eugenics, the creed of Darwinism, the creed of neo-Malthusianism, the creed of overpopulationism. But Planned Parenthood wouldn't begin performing abortions until the 60s. In fact, I have a Planned Parenthood health booklet they published in the late 60s where Planned Parenthood openly admitted abortion takes the life of a baby and it's dangerous to your life and health, end quote. If you scroll down on my Instagram far enough, because we put out a lot of content, you will find the scan of that health booklet published by Planned Parenthood in the late 60s. So they were publicly condemning abortions in the late 60s. What did he see 40 years before that? That ideas have consequences. That ideology is a hell of a drug. It'll take you further than you wanted to go and make you pay more than you wanted to pay. We're not so very far off right now from even the sacrifice of babies. How did he see that? How did he know where Sanger's ideas would take her when Planned Parenthood didn't know where their ideas would take them? Because he was a son of Issachar who understood the times, who was trying to warn the people so they would not be destroyed for lack of knowledge. What if we had heeded the warnings of G.K. Chesterton? What if the church had cared more about righteousness and the plight of their neighbors than their own reputations and 501c3 statuses? What if God's people had awakened and realized that the culture war was just a proxy war for a deeper spiritual war? But we buried the evil. We convinced ourselves that Christianity had nothing to do with politics. We wanted a place at the table. We wanted people to like Christianity. We didn't want to be reviled. So we buried the evil. But in burying the evil that was plainly before us, we implanted it. Which is why Alexander Solzhenitsyn, probably the most prophetic voice of the 20th century, who survived the Russian gulags and wrote the book Gulag Archipelago, famously said, in keeping silent about evil and burying it so deep within us that no sign of it appears on the surface, we were implanting it. So it would rise up 1,000-fold in the future. And did the ideology and evil of eugenics rise up 1,000-fold in the future? Thanks to the silence of Christians and the commitment of follow the science revolutionaries, tens of millions of people were murdered and forcibly sterilized because of the ideology of eugenics. Did you know that Sanger, Hitler, Stalin, and Mao Zedong would shed more innocent blood in the 20th century than all of human history before the 20th century combined? Did you know that? Because of the ideology and work of 4 individuals, more innocent people were slaughtered between the year 1900 and 2000 than were killed by all of the murderers, warlords, criminals, and tyrants of the previous history of the world combined. And they told you Christian nationalism was the great threat to freedom and democracy. I guess ideas have consequences, and bad ideas have victims. It's time to stop blaming the doers of evil and start resisting the spirit of the age and his obsession with wiping out the image of God from the earth. So we will finish with a story I told you last year in brief form of a young 21-year-old named Sophie and the namesake of my 3rd child, born 4 months after I was here, Sophie Sunshine. Because the same year Planned Parenthood changed their name from the American Birth Control League to Planned Parenthood, because Hitler kind of gave the term eugenics a little bit of a negative connotation. And everyone knew that Sanger and the American Birth Control League were not wrapped up in the eugenics movement, they were the eugenics movement. Did you know that in 1942 they changed their name? That's why. 42, I wonder why 42. That same year, while a company named Hoechst AG was producing a cyanide gas known as Zyklon B, which was used to poison Jews in Nazi concentration camps, and would later emerge by the company who bought Hoechst AG named Roussel Uklaf. Ever heard of the abortion pill RU486? It stands for Roussel Uklaf, that emerged from their majority shareholder Hoechst AG that produced Zyklon B. So when I tell you that this is all interconnected, I don't just mean ideologically, sometimes I mean quite literally they're the same people. At the same time that was happening, Sophie Scholl, a 21-year-old Christian living in Munich, found a paper on the sidewalk called Leaflets of the White Rose. And she picked it up and started reading it, and it said things like, if you know, why do you not act? This was 42, guys. Did you know the Jews had been wearing the yellow star for 2.5 years already? They were already being rounded up. They said things like, do not hide your cowardice behind the cloak of expediency. Yeah, that'll preach. And Sophie's thinking, my brother Hans talks like dinner like this all the time. Why does this leaflet sound like my brother pontificating and venting at dinner? Come to find out, the White Rose Resistance had not only been co-founded, it was being run by none other than her older brother Hans, who at 24 years old was just trying to protect his little sister because he knew how dangerous political resistance was to the Third Reich in 1942. Sophie becomes the youngest member and the only woman of the White Rose Resistance. They would stay up all night writing and printing and distributing anti-Nazi leaflets all around Germany to prick the collective conscience of the people and awaken the church to action. It was a social media campaign pre-digital age. And in 1943, they took things to the next level. So 80 years ago, it's 2023. Hans and Sophie, brother and sister, walked onto the campus at the University of Munich, which we are going to film at, and I leave in 5 weeks for our film. And Hans and Sophie walked into the university while class was in session and the halls were quiet. And they started distributing their illegal leaflets all around the university. By the way, the Nazis hated the White Rose Resistance, but they did not know who was behind it. Sophie then walked to the third floor balcony of the University of Munich, and she threw hundreds of leaflets 3 floors down to the atrium below. Now, what happens when you throw paper? It goes everywhere. That was the point. The janitor, a committed Nazi, caught Sophie in the act, called the Gestapo on the spot, and Hans and Sophie were arrested on February 18th, 1943, and those mugshots were taken that day. 21 and 24. Because they were arrested that day and murdered 4 days later, they missed a meeting they had that next week. Probably February 25th or 26th, a meeting that they would never make. That meeting was with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who had come to meet with these 20-year-olds who were building Christian resistance in 1943. Bonhoeffer, who was hung naked at Flossenburg prison on April 15th, 1945, whose final words were, "This is the end for me, the beginning of life." Killed for his involvement in the Valkyrie plot to try to kill Hitler. Christian nationalism. Well, I want to read to you Sophie's final recorded words in her cell room for the 4 days she was there before she was taken to the guillotine with her brother. And her cellmate, Elsie, was with her every final moment, and that's why we have these words. Her cellmate, Elsie, wrote letters to Sophie and Hans's parents after they were killed and explained every final moment of their daughter's life. And Sophie didn't blame evil people. She didn't scream at Tucker Carlson and say, "Why are they transing the kids?" Here's what she said. A 21-year-old will speak prophetically to us in the American church 80 years later to recognize how this all happened. The real damage is caused by all of those millions out there who just want to survive. The honest men and women who just want to be left in peace. Those who don't want their little lives disturbed by anything bigger than themselves. Those with no sides and no causes. Those who won't take measure of their own strength. Do we have strength, church? We don't take measure of our own strength for fear of antagonizing our own weaknesses. Those who don't like to make waves or enemies. Those for whom freedom, honor, truth, and principle, it's just literature. Those who live small die small. It's the reductionistic approach to life. Because listen, church, if you keep it small, you'll keep it under control. If you don't make any noise, the boogeyman won't find you. FBI, Department of Homeland Security. But it's all an illusion. Because guess what? They die too. Those people who they roll up their spirits into tiny little balls so as to be safe. Safe from what? Life is always on the edge of death. Narrow streets, guess what? They lead to the same place. There's wide avenues and a little candle burns itself out just like the flaming torch does. But I choose my own way to burn. All right. Can we ask a question together? Who talks like that at 21? Can I just tell you, that sounds like Chesterton or Churchill. That's a young woman with the lion of the tribe of Judah roaring inside of her to say, get off the bench. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Walk onto the field of battle for your king and watch how I'll work through you, because obedience is better than sacrifice. 4 days later, she had her head chopped off. And the prison guards were so disturbed by a 21-year-old's courage that they let Hans and Sophie meet with their parents in a side room right before they were taken to the guillotine. And Sophie's mother looked at her doomed daughter and said, remember Jesus, Sophie. And Sophie responded, yeah, but you too, Mama, you too. According to the executioner who dropped the blade, Sophie's final words were, the sun still shines. And Hans's final words was like William Wallace, freedom, freedom. So why do I tell you this story today? Because while rose blossoms may perish in the fall, they reappear in the spring. Amen. So while all of the members of this white rose resistance were found and executed, their sacrifice planted the good seeds of resistance. The good seeds of resistance in the hearts of millions whose actions will keep alive the legacy of the white rose. And your sacrifice, church, will water those seeds of resistance. So one day, thousands will be awakened and stirred to action. The white rose will blossom again, and we as the blood-bought bride of Christ can say the sun still shines, spelled S-O-N. This is a kairos moment for the blood-bought bride of Christ to wake up, stop paying lip service to what our Father cares about, but apply Christianity praxis in the public square, to give it all away, to live courageously, because God could have ended slavery, the Holocaust, and abortion, but he didn't. Why not? Is he not strong enough? Or does he wait for his people to rise up and move and work miracles through them? We've been missing out on the greatest adventure, which is to simply be used. Watch the miracles God works through obedience, so that one day when we sit around the marriage supper of the Lamb, we can say more than simply, I linguistically opposed evil. It was just literature and rhetoric. But we can say, look at the children alive, look at the families redeemed, look at people who gave their souls to the Lord, look at how America was turned around, not for our sacred rights, but to honor our King, to give God a reason to show America mercy, and to maybe put a smile on the face of God, and meet thousands of babies in heaven who can say your courage and obedience to your Father allowed God's plan for my life to be fulfilled. They go to heaven when they're killed. But that's not the point. Satan has spoiled what God meant to do through these children's lives. And our silence is complicity. Our silence is approval. So I am rebuilding the White Rose Resistance for this generation to rebuild Christian resistance and teach the church to be salty again. We have lost our saltiness. And the Bible says that that kind of salt is thrown underfoot and trampled. You wonder why it feels like the church is being trampled in America. Maybe it's because we've lost our saltiness. Our team is trying to put ourselves out of a job because I dream of the day when I'm not invited to speak in pulpits anymore. Because the church doesn't need my message. I don't want to constantly be tearing down the high places. I want to be rebuilding Christendom in America. I don't want to talk about eschatology. I don't know how it's all going to pan out, honestly. But I want to be found faithful. And I want to be found about my Father's high kingdom business. So I'm inviting you to join the White Rose Resistance this morning. You can scan the QR code on the screen, or you can fill out a card in the back. Listen, yes, I know about Bidenflation and Bidenomics. I know things are rough right now, but I'm trying to build the Turning Point USA of the pro-life movement to put myself out of a job. So if you scan the QR code,
All right. Let's pray. Father God, we thank you so much for this morning. We thank you for your call on Seth's life. We thank you for what you've made him to be, everything that you have put into him. Unbelievable. Thank you for his memory, for his passion, for the authority in which he speaks. The knowledge is just surreal. Boy, did we get some school done today. Father, we want to join you in sending him around the country, if not the world, and the films that he wants to produce, the one he's producing now, all that he is doing, all that you're doing through him. We see it, we back it. We thank you for it, God. And we, once again, ask that this church would be moved to get behind what you are doing and doing this morning clearly in the life of Seth Gruber and this White Rose Resistance. Because I think not just the unborn's lives depend on it, our own lives depend on it because of what's coming. And it's in the name of Jesus we pray and hope to be obedient. Amen. Amen. Listen, join that thing. Join the White Rose Resistance. I want to encourage everybody to go back there, do that. This church is the first place he went when he started the White Rose Tour. This is the first group of people that get behind it. You helped launch it. Did you know that? That's what you are. I ask you to keep doing it. Thank you.